So this movie wasn't really on my radar at first, but I had not one, but two supervisors at my job recommend this, and considering that both of them couldn't be further apart personality wise, I figured, okay, maybe there's something here with this movie. Not only that, but when I was doom scrolling on TikTok, we're all a victim of this, don't try to act like I'm a weirdo for that, I passed a live stream of someone going through their letterbox and they had like this movie had 5 stars, and I was like, whoa. So it was one of them situations where it seemed like the universe was just telling me that I need to probably give this a watch and this might be good. You know, when you have 2 supervisors recommend you something, then you're scrolling and then you also see the movie come up and they're giving it 5 stars as well. It was like one of those things where it was just like, okay, I guess I have to watch this at this point. But I will say, I watched it and it didn't really work for me, but I 100% understand why people love it, and obviously this is a review, so we'll get into that. But just to give a blanket definition, it didn't work for me, or I guess blanket opinion, it's not a definition, blanket opinion, I can see why it works for some people, but it just wasn't for me. So right off the bat, let me say that the first 30 minutes of this movie is absolute chef's kiss, and it's also the beginning of why I couldn't really get into the rest of the movie. In the beginning, it gave off this real gritty vibe that really worked for me. We get brief introductions to the characters, we learn about their motivations or lack thereof. They set up the premise well, so it's super easy to follow. It's basically, hey, you 2 snipers that aren't leaving much behind, the government has this gorge that has something sinister underneath, we need you 2 to watch over it for a year, and that's about it. And of course it's deeper than that, but that was like very easy to follow. And I was hooked. I thought I was about to watch some horror spy movie with some romantic beats, and when Miles Teller and Anya Taylor at the helm, I was super giddy about it because I like both of them. I think both of them are very talented. But then we get the scene with them passing notes and then hey ho let's go plays, and I think I almost shed a tear in disappointment. Once it hit me that this movie was choosing to take a lighthearted approach as opposed to an ominous one, it really took a lot for me to adjust my expectations accordingly. And I know that's a personal thing for me, but this is a review from a personal person because it's a, you know, it's an opinionated thing. And as the movie went on, I became more and more confused. Like, for example, why was making a point to show which month it was important at all in hindsight? Like in the beginning, it just detailed, you know, which month it is, but then it's like, that just didn't matter towards the middle. So it's like, why even do that in the beginning? It's like you set me up for this thing and then you just don't cash in on it at all. It's like, what's the point of that? Also, why did Levi make mention that love was never in the cards for him in his life, just for him to like fall head over heels for Draza so quickly? I mean, I guess maybe if I met Anya Taylor and I had a conversation with her, I probably would fall in love with her, and of course for a couple months as well, but that's besides the point. It's almost like the writer wanted the movie to go one way in the beginning and then completely changed tone at some point and forgot to rewrite the beginning to adjust for the change. It's like in the beginning he was like, yeah, I want to tell this ominous horror story, and then in the middle it was like, okay, let's get lighthearted with it, but then they forgot that in the beginning they wanted to make it this ominous horror thing. It just was very, very weird. Because here's the thing, I'm all for a movie that's lighthearted in tone, and I think Miles and Anya look like they were clearly having fun in this movie with their characters, but good golly gosh, Mr. Writer, you can't just be out here giving me blue balls like that. But I will say, even though the first act gave me whiplash, I'm really, really sorry for that joke, but it was like right there.
Push the goddamn button!
Push the goddamn button!
You heard what she said.
I think for what it was, the action was at least good, and the second act definitely was entertaining at least, and the chemistry between the two was done well. Just goes to show how much good actors can carry a movie, because had this just been some B-level actors in a Netflix original, I would be singing a completely different tune with that Act 1 tonal shift. I'm giving it a lot of bell right here because both of them, fantastic. I even kind of was on board for the plot twist that the Gorge was really a science experiment that they were still monitoring, and how it was a World War II project that went bad. I know it's like very predictable, like of course the government was behind it, like, you know, it's almost set up that way in the beginning to let you know that this is probably just some shady stuff going on, but even still, I liked it. It worked for me. All of it worked for me. I even thought the designs of the Hollow Men were pretty cool. I could have done without the one capturing Draza and taking her back to the lair, because the only purpose that served was to set up another set piece, but at least the set piece was cool, albeit dragging on a bit too long, which also was a big criticism I had for this movie. It just felt like certain scenes went on too long and that the editor kept forgetting to cut 10 to 15 seconds sooner. But once again, Act 2, you get a thumbs up. Good pacing, good action, dope color design. I like the transition from this yellow hue when they first land to this dark purple when they're exploring this, you know, gorge, to the bright red when it's a lot of action sequences. It was cool. Even when they escape from the lair, that whole set piece where it's like this orange goo with these faces on it and they're like moaning and groaning, it looked really, really unique. Now, since I harped on Act 1 and 2 enough, I guess it's time for me to move on to 3, and I thought it probably was the most straightforward but the weakest part of the movie. I think this is where the movie got a little too cliche, a little too on the nose with its predictability. We get this one sequence in particular where they're scaling the gorge on this truck with a wire, and I was into it, but as they get caught up by the hollow men who were scaling the wire, I was thinking to myself, why not just cut the wire behind them? But then I thought maybe I'm stupid and they actually need the wire. But not even 10 seconds later, they dump gasoline on the wire that the hollow men were climbing up, and then they throw a flare down that lights it all on fire, and that causes the truck to like jerk in a way that slams into Levi's foot, and like it kind of smashes in between the mountain, and then it basically crushes his leg. And then they end up cutting the wire right afterwards, which just left me confuzzled, because I'm just like, why did you go through all of that if you still were gonna just cut the wire? And then as the movie goes along, obviously we get this moment where they're trying to run away from this big blast that they set up, and Levi was stumbling, and it was like, oh, is he gonna make it? And then it was like, oh, okay. So he went through all of that and made that dumb decision to not cut the wire sooner, just so we can get a moment where he may or may not make it. So that whole sequence was just to set up a potential he might not make a situation, even though he ended up making it. Which, you know, I get it. It exists in movies. That's me being nitpicky. I'm sure plenty of great movies do stuff like that. It's just, you know, it bothered me, because I get it. And sometimes in movie plots, you have to hold your nose to take the medicine, but that doesn't always mean that the smell won't cut through or that the medicine will work. And in this case, both was apparent. Also, the big bad pulling up to the gorge, knowing that they have a nuke down bottom that 2 trained marksmen probably got recon on, was kind of crazy, especially considering that she pulled up with what, like 3 or 4 soldiers, which once again, these are highly trained snipers that you have watching this gorge. I feel like that was such an oversight, especially with that bullshit reasoning of, I'm the one that picked him. Like, lady, what are you on about? Why are you talking like you just got some position of power? Why are you coming here to take out a marksman with 3 or 4 soldiers like you didn't just hire one of the most talented, highly regarded marksmen that you have at your disposal? Like, you just didn't think that through at all? But, you know, it's whatever. This movie to me just feels like at no point did it have any idea of what it was at points, and then when it did, it got scared of its shadow and immediately flipped switches. When it chose to be ominous and lean more into the thriller horror elements, it worked. When it chose to be lighthearted and not take itself too seriously, it worked. I just wish that this movie picked a side, because both would have worked. Instead, I ended up not taking either seriously. Luckily for this movie though, it had 2 heavy hitters who can act their ass off, so they still made it a decent watch. And not for nothing, I liked a lot of the elements here like I spoke on previously. I thought the vibes of the gorge was dope, I thought the action was pretty good, and even though the CGI wasn't the greatest, I think the hollow men looked pretty cool. I think going into this movie, if you just shut your brain off and are looking for a movie with a cool premise and decent action with good acting, I think it'll be worth your while. But unfortunately for me going in, I thought it was going to have more to chew on, but I still didn't hate my time with it. But I just feel like this is one of those movies where with the right direction, it could have just been like one of them special movies, you know, one of those ones where it's like, whoa, this is like this should have went to theaters. This is like way too good for like an Apple show, or an Apple movie, I guess I should say. It's like one of them type of things, even though Apple does put movies in theaters, like that god-awful Argyle movie. But this is not an Argyle review. Grade rating, I'm gonna give it a C. I think this is about as okay as a movie can get for me, but do remember, this is just my opinion and not the opinion, because there is no such thing. And until next time, remember to eat your veggies.